Hello, good afternoon. My name's Stuart Henshaw. Welcome to this Integrated Skills webinar. I'm joined by my colleague, Jonathan Utley. Hi, John.
Hi, Stu. How's it going?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And John's going to take us through a kind of mini demo today. He's going to show us some of the features of SmartSuite, some of the features that kind of tie in with what we're talking about today, which is we've rather I've let the cat out of the bag a little bit with the title, and which I've called SmartSuite Minimum Touch, Maximum Impact. But we'll really be talking today about user experience. If you're cool, you'll refer to that as UX. Today I'll be referring to it as the user experience. I don't know how you'll be referring to it, John.
Well, UX, Stu.
Very good. I thought so. Well, thanks all for joining us. The usual rules apply today. If you've got a question, please do pop it in the message box. Today we've got a few different bits and pieces. We're going backwards and forwards between myself and John. What would be really quite helpful, I think, if we try and keep the Q&A to the end. We've got some time at the end for a Q&A session. So what we'll do is we'll gather up the questions that you've put in as you go through, and those questions that are at the top of your mind, you've written down already in the message box. And then, if you've got any other questions when we get to the end of the presentation, then we can look at those there in our Q&A session. As we often do, we give a quick sort of update of what Integrated Skills are doing. We're going to be at the APSI Waste and Recycling Seminar in Sheffield in the 18th of June. Looking forward to that. Come down and see us. Just a little bit of a recommendation about the event. We were at the street cleansing event in February in Coventry, and that was a really good event. Well attended. I think there were about 160 people there representing a number of local authorities, but for me it was a really good value event, and the conversation discussion was really top class. I'm expecting the same for the waste and recycling seminar in Sheffield. So yeah, if you're there, please come along and say hello. The second bit of news just there is our webinar archive. You'll see the link there to our webinar archive. We've now been running webinars, would you believe, probably 7 years now. I think it was 2019 we started. We're building up quite an archive of webinars, and if you ever do want to have a look at a particular topic and see whether we've ever discussed that before, then please go on there and have a look at the webinar archive, or just free to view, and you can download or watch through our website. Okay, a little bit of background. For those of you who don't know us, and I assume because you're on the webinar, you mostly have heard of us before, and say a little bit about us, that we are a waste management software company. We have a range of software products and services that we provide. Today we're going to be talking about our in-cab technology, but we're also pretty well known for our route optimization, probably best known for route optimization and the work we do with clients using RouteSmart software, but also we're providing trade waste management software and jobs management. We're not going to be touching on those on route optimization, trade waste or jobs today. We're going to be focusing very much on the in-cab technology side of things today. So let me start. I thought it would be good just to have a quick look at a brief potted history of in-cab technology. And so with my trusty friend ChatGPT, we had a look at the fairly short, but actually interesting history of those companies who were in the in-cab technology market when they entered the market, and really the trends that can be seen as that market has developed over the last years. As you'll see, Bartek, and often people refer to have you got a Bartek system? Well, they started in 2005, just a few years before we did, when we produced the first in-cab navigation device. And you'll see that those other companies came along in time. A lot of companies from sort of 2010, 2012, 2014, and those really have remained the main players in this sort of in-cab technology market. And I was just thinking recently about the way that market has changed and developed. Excuse me. And we do see and we get to view lots of the tenders and requirements that local authorities are putting out for in-cab systems. Quite interesting to see the developments and changes that people are looking for in their systems. I've got a couple of points really to make. Excuse me a second. To say that when in-cab systems first came out, they were, quite simple, but they were often linking. Firstly, they were probably digitizing routes, and then linking those to the in-cab system. And the early integrations would be with CRM systems. Fairly straightforward. But I think one of the common characteristics of those early systems was the integrations were quite difficult to do, to be honest, quite complex, and they were hard coded. So as my colleague tells me, they were actually also subject to quite irrational lapses and breaks, and it was very difficult to sort of work out what had gone on in those situations when the integrations were hard coded. People are still using those hard-coded integrations. We still work with a number of clients who've still got those in place. But really, I wanted to make the point that some people are still thinking about integration in that sort of phase of that hard-coded, quite difficult to do. I was speaking to a local authority the other day, and I was asking them when their contract was due for renewal for their in-cab system, and they were telling me they were still engaged in a very complex, difficult integration with this one supplier. And I did ask the question, have you come across APIs and how APIs have actually changed the environment and the integrations environment? It's very changed, very different. And in some ways, the second point I wanted to make here is that the coming of APIs, application program interfaces, if you wanted to get the technical term, a simple set of rules that allows one software system to interact with another, ask the right questions and get the right responses. That really has changed the game for integrations. It's no longer a convoluted process. I would sort of summarize it as in terms of days work rather than weeks or months work in the old days. So I would say that the coming of APIs has very much changed the complexion of in-cab systems. And I think the point I want to make today is that because of APIs, because they've changed the environment, then as purchasers of software of in-cab systems, then our advice would be to almost to kind of ignore the integration side of things. The question has often been, well, who have you integrated with in the past, as if that was the sign of the only people that you could integrate with in the future, possibly. Whereas I think the question that local authorities ought to be asking contractors and providers of software is, could you map all our integrations and actually use APIs to mirror those integrations together with your system? To which the answer from most suppliers would be, yes, we can. So it's creating this very much a level playing field where everyone can pretty much do those to do that kind of level of integration. So having created that level playing field, then what happens next is that as a company, we really strongly believe that the question of what software you're using should really be a question of, okay, what's the user experience for the software that you're providing, and how does the user experience that you're providing differ from some of the competitors? And that's really one of the key issues that we wanted to talk about today on the webinar. What do we mean by the user experience, UX, for those of you who like to use that phrase? From our point of view, we think it's probably based on three factors. So ease of use in the cab. And as we know, drivers have got enough to do already without adding burdens to what they're doing or their responsibilities for driving what is now becoming a very complex machine. They've got to be aware of all sorts of things, including the health and safety of themselves, the crew, the public, also using all the systems that they've got, aware of the alarms, etc. So in our view, an in-cab system should be a help and not a hindrance. And I think that's probably quite a good test, really, whether your teams and crews think that the software that you're using is actually a help or a hindrance. And I've just got one story which I think illustrates very well what I mean by software being a help. A few years ago, I was in a cab with a driver, and they were doing a proof of the authority was doing a proof of concept piece of work to see if the drivers liked the software that we provided in cab. And as we were going along, we had the screen, and they were following the map, and they were hearing the assisted collections at number 22, Marigold Gardens, being read out, assisted collection at 14, Hindersley Court, etc., etc. And the driver was slowed down. He got out of the cab, took a phone call, and came back into me and said, "Look, I'm sorry, I've got some bad news. We've just been, the unions have just asked us to go into industrial action." So, it's fine. I mean, I've managed waste services many years and know how sensitive these things are, and how small things can sort of turn, how things can quickly turn into industrial action. Anyway, I said, "That's fine. I'll leave the cab." So as I was stood up in the cab and started to unscrew the device from the window, and the driver said, "Whoa, hang on a second." He said, uh, "How about we just face it down?" So he said, "I won't be able to see the maps, but I'll still be able to hear the device shouting out the assisted lifts for me," which I thought was, which was a kind of victory in a way, and certainly I think it passed that test of moving from being a hindrance to a help. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. What are those things within the software where drivers are saying, "Oh, I really couldn't do without that feature anymore"? The second thing, thinking about our approach to user experience, over the years we've had our eyes on legislation, and obviously the use of mobile phones in cabs and the general in-cab legislation is getting increasingly restrictive, and we've just had some work done by a legal team on our latest user guide for our in-cab solution. And just to add at the end, I think I asked you a question whether you want a copy of our latest blog, which kind of details what we're doing on this safer driving, and a blog about our safer use guides. So we can provide those out to you and send those out if you'd wish. But it's from our point of view, it feels to us that the less interaction, the more you're going to be meeting and satisfied that you're meeting the health and safety requirements and the safety requirements of using in-cab technology. I won't actually spill the beans from what I was going to talk about later when I'm talking about our roadmap, but we've got some exciting developments on our roadmap for that. Third leg to this point about what we think user experience is about is, in terms of the back office, we think that the back office software should really be doing a lot of the heavy lifting for users. I go back into waste management for over a number of years when, when things were achieved by taking a piece of data out of one filing cabinet, rushing across to another, and updating something in another file, and then making sure you take the file back to the original filing cabinet. That was a critical thing. Obviously, things have moved on an awful long way, and we're using software systems now. But in some ways, there's still a level of that. We use software to pass one thing from one place to another, and then someone's still got to do something about it. We're really focused on trying to take out all of that heavy lifting. So, what's the problem? What are the issues? And trying to come up with some really innovative fixes. And John's going to be touching on a few of those later. Just to talk about that, there is a phrase that I quite like. I'm thinking about at the moment. It's called exactly once, which is kind of avoiding this multiple handling of data. So people who work in the back office, they want to be working exactly once, so they only deal with something in one way at one time. So that gives you a sort of a bit of a background to what we think UX is about. And I want to ask John in a few minutes to show us around SmartSuite. Today, just to announce that we will be showing you our very latest version of SmartSuite. Some of you may never have seen it before, but this is our very latest version of SmartSuite. Again, it's not released yet, but this is what you will have over the next weeks as it comes out for release. So I'm going to be asking John to have a look at these questions. So how have we built into the in-cab experience all the necessary data that people were going to use as a single source of truth? All the route data, all the service information, all the service exceptions, all the information about the day's work, all the information that someone might want to pass on to crews at the beginning of the day, or to a particular crew about a particular situation. How do we build all that in as part of the single source of truth? So that's all, if you like, baked in for that day's work. I'm going to ask John to talk about how we've, using technology, removed unnecessary interactions with the tablet. I already touched on that earlier on, talking about the legislation. But how have we used things like spoken instructions and alarms to make sure that you get the message over to the drivers and crews, and we make sure that they hear and understand what we want them to do. And then to focus again just on communication, making sure that everyone is able to understand everything they've got to do on that day, and they're also able during the day to sort of communicate with the back office too. And then the final point we wanted to talk about is how users can monitor their own performance. So how can they see how far they are through routes, how many job elements have they got to do still, or how many actions have they still got to perform. Those are the kind of things, John, I'm hoping that you're going to take us through in the next few minutes. And I'm now going to hand over to yourself. Cheers, John. Thank you.
Thanks, Stu. Hi, everyone. Hopefully you should be seeing a picture of a tablet with SmartSuite loaded on it. So as Stuart said, over the next sort of 5, 10, 15 minutes, we're going to be looking at SmartSuite Mobile and how all of those different sort of features and functions work, and those practices that Stuart was talking about are put into operation. So just to sort of backtrack slightly, as Stuart said, this is for any users, any people on here are already SmartSuite users. Obviously, this is going to look slightly different to what you're currently used to. So this is the next version of SmartSuite Mobile that will be released over the next weeks, possibly maybe a month or two. There's no exact date on that yet. And there are some slight visual differences. Obviously, the main elephant in the room being that we're not looking at an entire map screen anymore. We're looking at a 60-40 split between the map and the list view on the right-hand side. One of the primary reasons that was done within the application is because it gives users more, it gives the operators, the operatives in the vehicles, more information without having to interact with the screen. So the general way that this works is as we traverse along our route and we change segment street by street, the list will keep up with us and display only what is on our segment at that time. But if we wanted to, we can scroll through it like this to see what's coming up ahead of us as well. So that's the main elephant in the room I've discussed. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to click on the play button and let this run for a second onto a segment. Stuart was talking there about how the minimum touch is the approach that we want to take with these in-cab solutions to obviously protect the drivers, make their jobs as easy as possible. And that's exactly how the servicing's been designed within SmartSuite. So there's no need for us as a driver to be tapping on any of these points that you can see on the map representing the bins to say that we've done them. When we reach the end of the street, you'll see in a second, this is going to turn grey, and all of the points associated with that street have also turned grey. At the time that that's happened, within the back office, there's been a service logged against all of those individual properties in that street. So we can go back and easily see that either in real time or historically as well. And there's no interaction needed there from the drivers. They can just get on with their day and carry on servicing the bins that they need to do. One of the primary reasons we do this is because we believe that the correct approach for servicing within these in-cab solutions and the correct approach for marking issues is actually reporting by exception. So we don't want to be confirming that every single bin has been left out. We want to be confirming that the 1 or 2%, 3, 4, 5% of the entire route haven't been left out. And again, in order to do that, obviously there is right now required some interaction with the screen, but Stuart will give an update on the roadmap later on, which talks around some other alternative methods that will be coming in the future. And for a driver, they simply, with this map view and the list view, we can see the numbers on the screen. So if we wanted to say, for example, that number 2 hadn't left their bin out, we can select number 2 on the map. And if I just go back, I'll show you as well. We could also select number 2 on the list as well, which is a new feature in this next version. If there were any information about that property, we can see it there on the right-hand side, such as any actions, any comments, and the last known report to be created. We'll talk a little bit about the actions and comments in a moment. And if we wanted to create that report, we simply click the report button, and we have access to all of the reports within our list there to use. Obviously, there's going to be streets where there's multiple bins that haven't left, multiple bins that haven't been presented, multiple bins with different issues. In those cases, we can then click on the multi-select button and then continue tapping more and more points on the map in order to then create that same report against those in bulk rather than selecting them individually. The same also applies to the streets. So, there's different services that can use SmartSuite. We're not just talking about waste collection, excuse me, but in those different services, there may be a requirement to create a report against a street. For example, a street sweeper not being able to get down a street due to parked cars, wanting to report overhanging trees in a large vehicle. And the same thing applies there as well. So you can quite easily select the segment from the map. Again, same information on that right-hand side if anything already existed, and we can then easily click on the report button and create our report by clicking one of those options on the right-hand side. The keen eyes amongst you will have noticed that some of these reports have icons presented on the right-hand side. So you can see we've got a paperclip icon here, a pencil icon there. And those particular reports are indicating that the operative can do something extra with them. So when there's a pencil icon alongside a report, it means that the operative can add some text, which is then attached to that report and sent back to SmartSuite Web, which is the back office side. And if there's a paperclip on its own, it means that the operatives can attach a photograph to that report and send it back. As back office users, we can also configure these reports so that specific reports, for example, things such as contamination maybe or damaged bins, can actually require a photograph. So they won't be able to be created until the operative has used the tablet and taken a photograph through the application. So they can do all of that from within SmartSuite. There's no need for them to go outside of SmartSuite to do that. And again, that's all attached to that report and sent to the back office with it as well. So those are the sort of two primary types of reports that we would see drivers creating or operatives creating on a day-to-day basis is the service point reports, which is the reports against the bins, and the street segment reports. There is a third type of report that you can use. We can use this report regardless of if we're servicing or not. So we could be on our way back to the depot after finishing our route. We could be halfway through our route and create these reports. And this report is all about the operatives being the eyes and ears of the council at all times. So if I press and hold my finger on the screen, this little yellow triangle, diamond will appear there in the middle where I've selected, and we call this an ad hoc report. It allows the drivers, the operatives, to create reports against a specific location. As you can see, that's been registered at the top there. That isn't necessarily a bin on our route or a street on our route. It might not even be an area that's on our route. And the primary use case for things like this are things such as fly tipping, excessive potholes, damaged street furniture, graffiti, overhanging trees, those sorts of things. So they're able to report issues that don't necessarily have any effect on their work, don't necessarily have any effect on their service, but it's a useful piece of information to log at the time that they've seen it, so that can be sent back and dealt with accordingly by someone in the back office or in the operations team. All of those reports that we've just seen, we provide an integration with Fleet Clear for the cameras around the vehicle, and if configured with SmartSuite with Fleet Clear, we can actually get the report to capture the 5 minutes of footage around that to the time that report was created, and also attach that with the report to be viewed in SmartSuite Web in the back office, which means that as a back office user, you could log in and see that someone's created a bin damaged report, a bin out report, all these different things. You could see the comments that they left on that. You could see any photos they attached. And with the integration to FleetClear, you would also be able to see 5 minutes of live footage captured at the time the report was created, all within that report in the back office. To go one step further as well, there is an additional, one of the recent developments over the last year that we've added within SmartSuite is automations. And one of the primary use cases for using automations is for things such as reports. So we can configure in the back office so that when a specific report is created by a driver or an operative, maybe it's a bin was damaged and it needs a new one to be sent out, we can have that automatically send an email to a person of our choosing to let them know. So that's not requiring the person to log in, search for that report, find it, or maybe come across it by chance, or wait for the operative to go and tell them at the end of their route. As soon as the driver creates that report, it sends it to them via the automation, and they've got it in their email inbox straight away. And that can be people within SmartSuite that have access to it, and it can also be people outside of SmartSuite as well. So we can easily let people know of things that affect them as they're happening, rather than waiting for them to be told, or potentially for it to be forgotten in certain situations as well. So that's all around the reporting, how all of those functions work within SmartSuite. There are, if I just zoom pan across this route a little bit, you'll see some of these, there's lots of blue dots. Some of the blue dots have got different symbologies on them. So we've got this one here that's got a bit of yellow and red. We've got this one down here that's got a bit of orange, and the same can apply to streets as well. And these are all indicating where the individual properties or the streets have comments or actions. So to talk a little bit through that, when we say comments, these are things that are spoken out. So both comments and actions are spoken out to the driver as they drive past them or onto that segment. We would typically reserve comments to be information for the driver, such as that there would be multiple bins at a property. The bin is in a different location from the usual location. It might be around the side. It's information that's useful for the operatives to know when they're collecting that bin. The actions, on the other hand, we typically reserve for things such as assisted collections. It works exactly the same. When we're on that segment, it will be spoken out to us. The primary difference being that an action, sort of the clues in the name really, it gives the driver something, or the operative something to do when they get to that bin. So for example, for an assisted collection, you can see here we had an orange ring around the bin that's being serviced on our previous segment, but that property's actually got an action. We've got an actions list up at the top right here. So we can see all of the actions that are on our route and what they are. This is a text string within the SmartSuite web interface, and it can also be brought in from RouteSmart as well. So it can be absolutely anything you like. And yeah, so we can see all of our missed actions, we can see the upcoming actions, and we can also then see the actions on our current segment as well. If we approach a segment and we service it and we drive off and we don't confirm an action, you won't have heard it because my headset's really good at not picking up the sound from the tablet, but a little alarm bell will ring and it will say action not confirmed at, and then the address of the property. And in order for the operatives to confirm that they've done the action, all they need to do is simply either from the list within here, the actions list, the property in the list view here, or the property on the map, they select it. We've got another button down here at the bottom that says action, and they simply click on confirm and it'll all turn grey. So it's very few clicks, but adds quite a good amount of validation there to know that that's definitely been done, because obviously with the automatic service may come some areas where you definitely want to know this has been done 100%. That will log an individual time as well against that action. So when we search for that property within the back office, we'll be able to see that the action assisted collection was confirmed at this time by this person, and we've got all the information we need at that point as well. So that covers all the different sort of comments. As I say, we also have the comments against the streets, which are spoken as we get to the segments. So for example, we've got one here for traffic calming measures. I think there's one further ahead up here for reverse required. So these can be health and safety comments. They can be just general information that's useful to know when you're on that street. And the slight difference here is when we actually get to that street, the comment itself will display. It will not only be spoken out to the driver on the tablets, but it'll also display in a little orange bar just at the top of the screen when we reach it as well, which is very useful in vehicles of the sort of noise volumes of refuse collection vehicles. Now I know from experience of sitting in them that they're not always the easiest things to hear, these tablets. So having it displayed on the screen as well there is very useful for the drivers. So as we approach this segment here, we've actually just passed a segment that was only servicing on one side. So you can see there, only the points on the left-hand side of that segment have turned grey, and the ones on the right are remaining blue. But as you can see, we're onto this segment now that has the comment traffic calming measured, so we can see that at the top of the screen there. Talking about sort of navigation and how we get around the route, one of the other features within SmartSuite is the A to B, which allows the operatives at any point to choose a service point, a street, an ad hoc location, and also search for addresses or place names and navigate themselves to that place. So that will generate them the most optimum route from where they are to that point, and will also take into consideration any restrictions that have been set, width, height, length, weight, on those roads within the OS street map. So we'll be able to see within there if we've got those restrictions set on those streets and your vehicle is going to have trouble getting down them, then the A to B will avoid those in those cases and not send the driver down them. So earlier, Stuart, you were asking, how is it you can see what you've done? How do we get sort of that record of our completion? So at any point, if I zoom out here, we can then look at the entire route. We can see the grey bits on the left-hand side that we've done. We can see all the things in blue that we've got to do. There's a lot of flexibility in the way that we position the screen as well. You'll notice that at some points I've had it where it's sort of following me in the Google Maps style. But other times I've then zoomed out and I've had it locked in a certain position. So those are all options that are available to the drivers. And that's good UX, Stuart. Allows the drivers to have the screens the way they want them. It adds a little bit of the flexibility to it. Some drivers will prefer to just have the areas up on the screen and drive them. Some drivers will prefer to have it follow them along so they can see exactly where they are and the immediate what's next. And available also to the drivers in terms of things like seeing what you've done is up at the top right. We've got this little statistics page. We can see already that we're 5% the way around our route. And if we click on that, it'll actually show us the individual statistics there. So how many of the segments we've completed, how many bins, and how many of our actions as well that we've still got to do. One of the other areas that things like the minimum touch come in is to do with communication as well. So there are two primary ways that we can communicate with the tablets from the back office. The first one is two-way messaging. So we can send messages down to the tablets as back office users. The tablets can send messages back up to us, but the tablets can't message each other for obvious reasons. And when we send those messages, we can actually include predefined responses. So we can add a few different responses in the messages so that the drivers don't have to sit there, pull over for 5 minutes, tap on all the things. They can just pull over, tap one of the predefined options that we've sent for them and send the message off and then get on with the day. So by using those, it sort of reduces the amount of time that it would take them to respond, but also, gets you a response a bit quicker as well. The other way that we can communicate things down to the tablets is through what we call notifications. So at the point in which I'm loading my route, I go through a series of selection screens to say what service I'm running, what area I'm in, and then what route I'm doing. And through each of those selection screens, we can add a notification which appears on the screen. It's like a bulletin board style list on the side. So for example, if we knew that a specific service or a specific area, or even a specific route was nearby to an event that was on that week, and there was going to be streets closed, there was going to be, issues with the public being possibly quite close to the road, all those different things, we can add those notifications on for a specific time, so that as the drivers are loading the route, they can't miss those things being displayed to them. There's no sort of problem over not remembering that you've been told of that thing. It's all just there on the screen as you're loading through your route, and will disappear at the end date as well. So those are the sort of two primary ways that we can communicate with the tablets. And yeah, the notifications work very effectively because, as I say, there's no way to miss that. You have to see it when you're going through the route selection screens. The last thing that I'm going to show you before I hand back over to Stuart is possibly one of the big headaches within the industry, within the day-to-day lives of the operations teams and the people that make this work happen, which is vehicle breakdowns. So in the event that this vehicle broke down at 10% the way around its route, what we've built into SmartSuite is the ability essentially for us to just give this route to someone else with the same 10% completion, the same action confirmations, the same reports being created. All of those bits and pieces of every sort of breadcrumb up until now can be handed off to someone else and they can take over it. And that's done very easily by stopping the route. And at the bottom of the screen, we've got a button here that says handover route. As soon as we click that, the route would disappear for us. We can await recovery, whatever it is that's going to happen to us, and anyone else can come in and load the route. And at the point in which they load this route, it will say, do you want to restart the route from fresh, or do you want to pick up from 10% where the person before you, and it will tell them who it is left off. They can then click on that 10% and they can see everything we've done, all the reports we created, all the actions we confirmed. They get the full story of everything that's been done, and then they just pick up where they would like to. How about, does it, Stu? You're on mute, Stu.
Gosh, that really is embarrassing. But the slide that we're using just to pass backwards and forwards is a slide I've used for a number of presentations here, but it just makes the point. Actually, you mentioned it there, John, and we've been doing this for so many years now that we actually kind of sometimes forget to mention this, that this is a device that is intelligent, that's actually speaking out to the crews. And in this case, there'll be a quiz at the end of the webinar today to remember the address where there's an assisted collection. That one's particularly for Thomas Kelly at Lancaster, if you're there, Thomas. Right, moving on. Let's have a look at, you've had a look at the mobile side of this, but let's have a look at where the user user experience impacts on the back office. And we think there ought to be well, a few things that you experience this in the back office. Firstly, our software is doing the heavy lifting in 4 areas. First one is data security, and just we haven't actually had much discussion on this so far, but just to say that we are sitting, the platform that that SmartSuite sits on is the Microsoft Azure platform. And although they would never give figures, but if you look at their charts and diagrams, Microsoft's expectation is that by using their platform, the Microsoft Azure platform, you are actually removing something like 70% of your data headaches as a local authority. So Microsoft are taking those on board. That's based in the UK and the south of England. The second thing I wanted to touch on was, okay, how do we maintain service data as a single source of truth? Single source of truth is something we've talked about many times, and it's absolutely it's critical to make sure that the service has been run well and you're making those efficiencies, you're not duplicating resources. How do you maintain, and it's something that we're not going to be able to show today, but just to say that there are a number of different ways that you can maintain your service data. So you can import your data from RouteSmart routing software. You can actually maintain your service data in the back office, so you can go on and very, very quickly and easily you can add things like an assisted collection, you can add an action to a particular property, so you can manage it at that level. The third level where this becomes quite helpful is that you can actually also, using an API, you can integrate that with your CRM. So the CRM team can actually add an assisted collection without you even being involved, if that's what you need to happen. John, I've got a couple of questions, but the first one here is, I want to ask you, how could we view performance in SmartSuite in the back office? Can I pass that over to you?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the ways that we can view performance, and this is the reason I'm showing this module, is because it's one of the more recent sort of creations from us, the recent additions to the back office software, which is the service history map view. So we previously had this in a table view where we can see individual sort of street by street in a list. What were the service times? Has it been serviced? And all of the other information to do with actions. Have they been confirmed? And actually, we had feedback from clients, from current customers saying, well, this would be really useful in a map. And that was always something we wanted to do as well. So what we're looking at here is the route that I had open. This is one I'd sort of been playing with previously. And we can see down the left-hand side, we've got, this is the card. We can see who's been doing that route, the vehicle they were using, how many of the points, the bins have actually serviced, and how many were remaining. And below that, we can see sort of a timeline of exactly what's happened. So when they started, when they were pausing the routes, and then when they ended up finishing the route as well. On the right-hand side, the map side of the screen, we can zoom down to the route, and we can see similar sort of premise as what was happening on the tablet. Is the things that are the grey, the light grey here, are the things that are serviced, and the things that are the darker grey are the things that we didn't service. We can zoom down and we can see all of the property numbers, the properties where there were comments, and we can hover over those and see their status as well. And then again, we can see those actions there. So we can see this property was serviced at 1:20, and the assisted collection action there confirmed 10 minutes later at 1:30. So this module gives you a good overview of all of that, to see what has been done, what hasn't been done, in a map view, and there'll be several enhancements coming to that in the future as well, to include lots more useful features. The original view of this, which is obviously still very useful if you preferred to view this in the list view, is just purely the service history module. So we can see within here the routes, we can see the progress on the right hand side as we could before, but instead of seeing that map view, we're seeing the sort of raw data. So we see each individual street, and we can break those down into the points as well. We can see what time the actions were confirmed, and we can also search for addresses to find them easily. That answer your question, Stu? You're muted again.
We've only been doing this for 6 years. I'm going to get the hang of this muting and unmuting at some point. Okay, that's pretty granular set of data, and it's interesting that you can go back and you can actually see the map view from a particular day and time, and look at the individual property progress. So from that, then my next question, the next challenge, and I know you know the answer because yeah, we've talked about this, but this is a problem, and having managed services in the past, this is a real issue. The question is not what have you done. The question really is, what have we not done? So this is my question to you. How can a manager then say, okay, at the end of today, what's not been complete? Second part of the question is, and what can we do about it?
Sure. So again, another relatively new module. This isn't currently released. It's very, very close to being released to our live clients. Is the route sharing module. So answers that exact question that you're asking there, Stu. This is all of the things within the refuse service for today that haven't been completed. So we can see all of the bins here on the map. And we've got several choices in what we do here in order to get these onto devices and get these missed bins collected. The first one is if we were of the mind and we wanted to, what we do is we create these temporary routes on the left-hand side. We're not creating a brand new route because obviously these already belong to a route. This will be work over several routes for the day that's been missed. So we call these temporary routes that we're creating on the left-hand side. And let's say I want 2 of these temporary routes. I want to create 2 routes to give to 2 different drivers to go and complete that work. All I would do is using the polygon tool is I hover over and circle around the bits that I want. Once it selects those, it's going to display them in the list at the bottom for us, and we can see all of the different addresses. If there are comments and actions, these will also be displayed here as well, so we can see whether there's assisted collections in there or any other things we need to be concerned about. We can see a total duration demand, but importantly, what we can do is we can assign these to the first route, and then what we can do after that is we can then circle around the second set of data. We can assign all of that to the second route. And once we've got that in there, we can use the sharing button to then send those temporary routes down to devices. We can set a scheduled date for those as well, so we can say when we would like for those to ideally be done by, and we can actually choose the individual operators that we want to send them to as well. So once we've got all that assigned and it's all looking nice and clean, as long as we're happy with it, we can then go to the next steps. In addition to that, sort of touching on the communication, we can also send messages with this, so we can apply messages to that when we want to. So within the little tool there on the left hand side, you can see the bubble where we can add text in. So coming into here, we can open that up. We can choose our operator. We can choose a scheduled date, and then we can also send a message with that and send them to the drivers. The second way, and the way that I like, I'm just going to refresh this to get it as a clean page, and the way that I like to do it within here is actually to lean on the clever algorithm of RouteSmart. So we have a direct link through here to be able to optimize and actually create routes using the RouteSmart algorithm from directly within SmartSuite. So instead of me choosing the bits and pieces that I wanted to do, all I do with this method is I would circle everything that's remaining that I want to generate routes from, which in this case was quite a wide selection of properties. So we can see there we've selected 1079. We can see the duration, the demand. And here I can click on the generate routes button, and I've got a few different options here. So I can either tell it how many routes I want, or I can also tell it a target time for those routes. But just going back and making it simple, we've got all of this data at the top. If we say we want to generate 2 routes from that, click on submit. We can see in the top left now that this is generating routes. So this is sending these points into the cloud to the algorithm and asking it to generate us some routes from that data. And in a matter of seconds, hopefully, he says, we should see 2 fairly logical looking routes on the screen in front of us that we would then be able to send down to drivers. That's my preferred method, as that requires less clicks and more sitting back. But there you go. There's our 2 routes, the red and the green. And we can also see the sequence numbers, so we can sort of see how those routes have been planned as well.
I think, John, that's by talking about taking the heavy lifting out of it. I think well, if we've got RouteSmart Engine, then that's obviously using technology and using the routing algorithms to actually answer the question, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Many people won't have the time actually, or inclination to be looking at them and deciding how many routes they need. Some may, but just to be able to actually lasso the properties you've got left over at the end of the day, and then ask RouteSmart Engine to solve that problem, and then to send them off into SmartSuite. It seems like the sort of perfect outcome, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, John. Okay, we've got a few slides left. I just wanted to touch on, which is added value. I think if you're buying a car, and if you're listening to a car salesman, they'll be looking at the sort of surprise and delight features, I think they're called. Let's call them added value. But what are the really nice to have additional features that really do help the drivers? And it's kind of that nice to have sense that I mentioned about earlier on, right at the beginning of this webinar, when I had the driver and he was kind of obviously quite taken with the fact that you can have assisted collections spoken out to you. Well, you know, we've mentioned already in the webinar here that we've got an integration with Fleet Clear, and we can actually use the CCTV footage. Let's talk though about something else. Let's have a look at another area where we feel there's some really added value, and it's also doing a lot of heavy lifting at the same time. Let's talk a little bit about telematics, and we are let me conclude. We did start talking about the future of, or the history of in-cab devices, and a sort of my potted history. I think it's important that in contrast, you actually are able, with your provider, to look at the future and understand what's expected in the future. We've talked here, you've seen a few things today that actually are not live yet, but are on are ready for release and on our roadmap. We think it's really important in terms of user experience that they have a good user experience today, but there are also new features that come out in response to discussions we're having with you as clients, and they appear on a future roadmap. We've got a future roadmap which I'm just going to touch on, and the one thing I'll let the cat out of the bag again, John, but one thing I wanted to touch on is we have every intention of providing a SmartSuite version. And going back to what I said earlier on about the safer driving and the legislative requirements, a hands-free version, fully hands-free version for mobile, which we are starting on before the end of this year, and we're working on the beginning of next year. This is one of several roadmaps we've already knocked out, a few years worth of development, and so this is, you can see where we are. You can see, so I've put in here some recent completions, but this is what we're doing for Q2 and Q3. Dynamic routing functionality, more of that kind of dynamic functionality that John showed you earlier on, tapping into the power of RouteSmart Engine. Participation monitoring, doing more of that work, automations, and enhanced vehicle surveys. Looking forward then, we talked already about hands-free, but also we're going to be responding to digital waste tracking, and bullet point down there, but looking at the route editing in SmartSuite. We sort of touched on there the ability to use RouteSmart Engine within SmartSuite, which is pretty exciting. So I will send this with a recording of the session today. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope we've given you a view into why we think user experience is and should be top of your concerns and interest in moving forward in terms of in-cab technology and back office technology. So that you can be removing tasks and reducing tasks for drivers and back office teams. You can be meeting the tightening legislation around safe driving, and we think that software should be doing what it should be doing, which is removing the heavy lifting. We've got a minute for Q&A. We are happy to go over that, but please do give us any of your questions or queries on anything we've talked about here. Let me just go back to one question that Sandy Twynham from Newcastle asked earlier on. Are there any intentions to prepare SmartSuite to be able to be used for grounds maintenance? Sandy, that's something we'd like to certainly have a conversation with you about. We have had other authorities ask us exactly the same question. And as you're probably aware, if enough authorities ask us the same question, then we need to follow the signs and think it's probably time to actually be doing some development in line with that. We have nothing on the market at the moment. We can help you to route that, but a SmartSuite version for grounds maintenance sounds like a very good idea and something we'll look at in the future. Would like to have a conversation with you. We're about to hit 4 o'clock, and all I want to do is to thank you for attending. Really appreciate you attending, and to thank John. A question from Leon: have you API'd into any resident-facing solutions? That's a very good question. The answer is yes, we have. We've API'd into a citizen app very recently for one of our clients. So the answer is yes on that one. Yeah, we have an API solution which can be amended and made to work with a number of different solutions. So the answer to that is yes. We've reached the end of the time we had allocated, but I really do appreciate you joining, and thanks very much for being with us today. I've got one question, which is just part of the survey. Let me just ask you these questions. Has this webinar been effective in any way in clarifying your thoughts on the importance of user experience? And my next question is, we have got a copy of our in-cab safe use blog. Please let us know if we can send that off to you, and we'll send it off absolutely fine in the next couple of days. Thanks very much. I hope it's sun shining where you are. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much for attending. John, thanks very much for your contribution too. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.